Well, shalom, shalom, everybody. Ariel Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School, found online at www.KosherTorah.com. And just to give us a little bit of a time reference, today it is the 30th of August, 2021, and we are now going to start a new series of classes for the general public here, which I have entitled Kabbalah 101 Plus. This is like the follow-up of our previous class, which was Torah Basics 101 Plus. And for those of you who followed us in that course, you know my definition of basics might be a little different from other people. Well, when it comes to Kabbalah, you can rest assured that that certainly is true. I'm going to teach you now, share with you now, what I call the Real Kabbalah. And it's going to cover a lot of area, a lot of material. You might find me to be rather iconoclastic. Big fancy word for saying I'm going to rock your boats. For those of you who follow me on Facebook, you saw I posted a little post where I warned people. I told them honestly, we're not an outreach organization here at the KosherTorah School. Everybody's welcome to come study with us, but I confess that which we teach here is not for everybody. And for those people who want to study with us, our door is always welcome for you to enter. And for those who find that what we have is not for you, our door is always open for you to leave. There's a fly walking across my camera right now. I hope he doesn't go in the way of the lens. But anyway, that's just the way it is, because I believe that what we need to learn, what we need to experience right now, is of vital importance. And by way of sharing, I've always made a point. I definitely and absolutely do not believe that there is a distinction and a difference between the holy, lofty, spiritual, and mystical, and the nitty-gritty, down-to-earth, real stuff. You have seen here this is my office, my home, and you've seen my family. For those of you on social media, you might have seen some of the postings of the Rabbi. You've seen my canine daughter, Sierra. Well, I want to introduce you to the new member of our family. You see, recently, the Rabbanit and I adopted a baby. Yes, we did. Oh, no, not a human baby. Of course not. There are plenty of human babies, all too much. We went to a store and one of these adoption centers, and the Rabbanit absolutely fell in love with now our new daughter. Should we bring her on? Come, let's introduce everybody to our new daughter. This, everybody, is Levana, a beautiful little female white shepherd. This is now Sierra's little sister. You gotta see the two of them when they get together. Sierra's right here at my feet, you should know. And this is Levana. Say hello, baby. Say hello. Say hello. Yes. This is Mommy's little girl, you should know. Come, Mommy. Take our little girl back. And yes, so now we're getting back to the way things used to be in Teleco. In Teleco we had 6. But a point again that I'm making here, this is actually very important for Kabbalah 101. Don't ever make the mistake, and it is a big mistake all too many people make. Don't ever become so heavenly minded that you become no earthly good. That is a big message of importance. Remember, the whole point of Torah is not a theology. It is not a philosophy. It is not to get you focused up there. It's to get you grounded down here. And that is what Torah at all of its levels is all about. Before we dive into the real meaning of Kabbalah, I want to focus on something that, if you've ever studied the Bible, you should know. The Bible, the thing that I respect about it the most is that it is very emphatically anti-heroic. What I mean by that, it does not elevate the patriarchs or any of the, in quote, leaders of our people, role models, to a pedestal status of perfection. That concept and idea, unfortunately, is rather common today. And I think that that's the absolute contradiction and opposite of what the biblical message was all about. When the Torah, and remember something about the Torah, okay? Yes, we accept the divine word of God and the like, okay? But Torah is not a history book. It was never meant to be a history book. It is meant to be a moral guide. So, whether we are reading the Torah stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Moses and Aharon, or the later stories of the judges, of David, of Solomon, or the prophets and the like, we are experiencing the lives of human beings. And in case you haven't noticed, with all of those references, every one of them, oh, a lot of rabbis aren't going to like this, and too bad to you guys. They, remember, people of the Tanakh and the Talmud, they are people just like us. They had highs and lows in life. They had good times and bad. They had all the problems that we face today. But they were chosen in their day and time to be role models and archetypes for us today. And it is of a vital importance that we remember that when we look at the lives of the biblical personages, the Talmudic personages, we're dealing with real people, with real problems, real struggles, real stuff. Can you hear that? All right, that's the Lord speaking and saying, I agree. Or thunder, depending on your wish or of interpretation, if that even came through. But is Sierra afraid? Sierra, come over here. Sierra's terrified. She doesn't like thunder and lightning. She really doesn't. Huh? Is she crying? Don't worry about it. Let her get used to it. Okay, slide down and behave. Now, again, I've always told you, I don't believe that there's such things as distractions or anything of the kind. Real life, real people, real stuff. So, when I got my little Sierra here, who gets afraid of thunder because it's a loud noise and she gets afraid, she needs a little attention, you know what? It's not only my place to give her attention, it's our place. And we are going to learn from her example. The things that we need to do, even when we're studying Torah. Remember I said, don't become so heavenly minded, you become no earthly good. This is a creation of God, who has its own feelings and thoughts and needs. And the universe put us together, and I am in the position where I have the responsibility to provide for the needs of this creature. And if in the middle of our learning Torah, this creature has needs, I am not exempt from those needs because of teaching Torah or anything of the kind. They are simultaneous. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because this is a vital lesson for us to learn. Don't become so heavenly minded. Don't think, oh, I'm so religious, I'm so this or that, I'm busy doing this, I can't do that. You're not getting the message. You're not understanding what it means to serve heaven. Serving heaven doesn't mean you bow down to God, blah, blah, blah. You know, it means that you live a moral, righteous, and decent life, fulfilling your roles and obligations and responsibilities. And if you ain't learning that, you haven't learned anything of Torah, be it pshat, sod, or anything. Just relax, sweetheart. Relax. Everything's okay. So, with no further ado, let's talk about Kabbalah. Kabbalah has come a long way. In case you don't know its history, What Kabbalah once was, it no longer is. And what Kabbalah is, certainly is not what it once was. The word Kabbalah, Hebrew, we all know that, it means to receive. Lekabel is the verb form, to receive. All right? What am I receiving? Should we bother to ask, from whom am I receiving? Or should we put the concept of, or the reception aside, and deal with other things? Because when you look into the Torah itself, you already have a great number of, for lack of a better word, spiritual experiences going on. We're going to review some of these. And none of these are by the definition of the word Kabbalah. But they are, I'm thinking 5 words all at once. I don't like to use the word spiritual, simply because I don't think it really has an agreed upon meaning that when we use the word, we're like thinking the same things. I could use the word interdimensional, otherworldly. Of course, I could always throw in the word extraterrestrial. But the problem, of course, with using the word extraterrestrial when it comes to otherworldly or interdimensional beings is that we tend to think of like flying saucers with little green men and ray guns zapping people. And again, someone's asking here in text, what about mystical? But what does mystical mean? I've come to a different use of terms that I think is more appropriate within our context. I like to use the word natural and, if you will, I won't say versus, supernatural. And the reason why I choose these words is because both of them contain the word natural, meaning from nature, meaning created by the divine, part and parcel of the universe, the way things are, whether it's this reality or the multiple others. Now, here's an interesting question. Natural, we all know what that is, the natural world around us in which we live. What then is supernatural? You're going to say, the invisible worlds that we don't see. Yeah? Well, I got news for you. The invisible world that we don't see is slowly but surely becoming seen. And that which was once supernatural by subjective definition is no longer such, but is now natural. Oh, you want an example? How about like internet communication, the likes of which we are experiencing at this very moment? Now, how many of you, obviously, may be watching this on a cell phone, a smartphone? Okay? Now, I'm actually using my phone to record this class and to talk with you. And I see the people who are live. I see text floating in here and all the like. Where is all this stuff coming from? Obviously, it's coming from waves, which are being received by a receptor. Oh, receptor, Kabbalah. Inside the cell phone. You all know this is technology, right? But is this not a technology using wavelength function and the rest, which is invisible to the physical eye? But of course, it is using all kinds of light waves, electronic waves, and the like, which is not within the spectrum of visible light to the eye. But it's there to prove of this. Here we are. It's invisible. But isn't the invisible the definition of the supernatural? So maybe 200 years, even 100 years ago, if I were to sit down and have a discussion with great scientists of the day, Isaac Newton, later Benjamin Franklin, and discuss with them the type of cell phone technology like we have today. They might have said that that was rather supernatural. Now, if we had a modern day scientist who could explain these things a heck of a lot better than I can, speak with Mr. Newton, Mr. Franklin and the like, maybe they would have understood it better. But it shows us that there is in operation invisible functions which we interact with on a daily basis. Now, we have created tools, machines, technology, wherein which we can therefore translate the invisible into function which is visible. We understand this concept. This is all science. Now, extrapolate. Go further. Science, unfortunately, like many religions, can be rather arrogant. Back at the turn of the 20th century, around the year 1900, you had scientists who said, "We know almost all that there is to know. There's nothing more to be learned." Such arrogance. And scientists today, 120 years later, know that. Where will our science be 120 years from now? Or 120 years after that? Or 120 years after that? What other realms and domains which at this time are unknown or invisible or supernatural to us will we discover, interact with, and learn or apply tools of usage, wherein which they will no longer be supernatural, but natural? So, we have always claimed throughout history that there are higher domains in which we interact at realms of consciousness and interact with beings that exist in these domains and the like. Well, certain elements of recent science would condemn such concepts and ideas as fantasy and foolishness. Oh, there's no such thing. Yeah. Well, you might remember way back when the UFO craze began back in the late 40s and 50s, where in which you had absolute government control almost enforcing the concept that all these things were fantasies and foolishness, nonsense, and the like. And only recently, where in which you had a government turnaround saying, yeah, there's really something there. And what the government really knows, they ain't going to tell you. They're just not. So don't wait for the, in quote, disclosure to come from government. What they're concealing and hiding is being hid and concealed for very, very good reason. Now, with that being said, can you imagine if we could develop technologies in the psychic domain, using the power of mind and consciousness, exploring the higher dimensional planes, and actually developing technologies to both augment such content, augment such contact, and eventually learning to explore those domains as much as we would explore any physical domain on the face of the earth? You could say, wow, that'd be pretty radical. Give it a couple of centuries of exploration and the like, and who knows what we might come up with. We might be able to tap into areas and realms of consciousness inside and outside the human body and arrange ways of communications with it. As such, we would be able to communicate with souls, the dearly departed, and the passage of life and death would no longer be an unpassable divide. You'd be inside or outside the body at ease, at will. All right? Someone's going to die. Says, okay, yeah, I'm dying. Oh, I'll tell you what. All right, so I'll call you back later. And, yeah, okay, have a happy death, and I'll call you back later. All right? I'll call you. I'll talk to you tonight at 8 from the afterlife. You tell me how things are going. That sounds ridiculous. It sounds crazy. But with the development and ways and means of our understanding of the natural world which God created, it's not impossible. And when we want to talk about messianic futures of a new heavens and a new earth and what things are going to be like in those days, you never know. I, for one, do not believe that technology is bad, wrong, and evil. I think it's a great thing. I think it's a wonderful thing. Yes, tree of knowledge, good and evil. Being that technology is based on knowledge of this physical world, you can have a very bad side of technology, the likes of which could be inharmonious with nature and therefore cause repercussions and stuff like that. Mother Nature, Gaia, very much alive. A lot of modern science I've seen in history programs and these shows ask, is the earth alive? We talk about this in our traditions. But here you go. You see, we have traditions in our Torah, as others have traditions in their beliefs as well, that there's a lot more to our world than we know it. Now, one of the things that we've talked about in other places and the like is our beliefs in what we call the pre-Adamic civilizations. It's well documented by our rabbis and even hinted to in the Torah itself. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and Genesis 1:2. And the earth was, the Hebrew word is tohu, which is some translate as void, chaotic, empty, whatever. And yet, how did the world get to be tohu, which means empty, void, and chaotic? Because later, the prophet Isaiah says the world was not created in tohu. Well, if the world was not created in tohu, and yet in Genesis 1:2 it is in tohu, well, how did it get that way? Something is missing between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. We have numerous literature from our sages talking that there were pre-Adamic civilizations dating back thousands, possibly even millions of years. What they call today Atlantis and all the like, and the discoveries of ancient civilizations here, well, that might be shocking revelations for those of us who have been, let's be blunt, lied to and told that human civilization is only 6,000 years old. Before that, we were cavemen. Well, for those of us, the ancient traditions, as King Solomon said, Ein kol hadash tachat hashemesh. Nothing new under the sun. We all knew this. We've always known this. So when you want to talk about what we received, you got to go back long before Sinai, long before Adam, to a time not recorded in the 5 books of Moses, but very clearly discussed by our sages who received not only the written traditions, but the complementary oral traditions as well. So, Atlantis, Lemuria, there existed all of these civilizations. They were advanced, technological, and they, using our biblical terms, never ate of the tree of knowledge, good and evil. And they did not have a division and distinction between what we call higher and lower dimensional realities. For them, it was simultaneous and harmonious. You can look today to certain tribes of Aborigines, certain old ancient peoples who have not been part of modern civilization, who still live very much in touch with nature. They understand this. They are the receivers of the oldest of old traditions. In later Kabbalah, this is referred to as the days of the kings who reigned in Edom, prior to there being a king in Israel. We call this the pre-Adamic civilizations. And indeed, there are many secrets about this. I've written about this and talked about this for a long time. much of this teaching has been incorporated within our Torah. Now, you want an interesting Masorah, if you will, talking about the Kabbalah? We all know that the children of Israel came forth out of Egypt, right? We all know that, Moses and Egypt. You can read books like Israel and Humanity by Rabbi Ben Amozeg, available in English. It's part of the Torah, the classics of Western civilization, spiritual civilization, something like that. You can get it on Amazon. Great, great reading. Israel and Humanity. I have courses on it available at our KosherTorah school. And a point that Rabbi Ben Amozeg makes, as well as many other rabbis, as well as documented in history. Much of what Moses incorporated into the Torah had its origins in Egypt. And there was a lot of cultural accommodation. And know that, remember, Moses was raised in the royalty and very possibly priesthood of ancient Egypt. And the ancient Egyptian culture had secret levels in it, not all of which were idolatrous. And in that respect, even circumcision was practiced in Egypt long before God commanded it to Abraham. Going later into Greek teachings of Plato and the like, they claim knowledge of the ancient civilizations from thousands of years before, which we know today as Atlantis, the kings who reigned in the land of Edom prior to there being a king in Israel. The pre-Adamic civilizations from very possibly thousands of years ago. Well, it is taught that many of the teachings, the good teachings of the pre-flood times, have been passed down, and that they were brought down into modern, well, I should say modern, but in the Adamic times. And it's very possible, according to Egyptian and Greek sources, they were receivers of many of the ancient Atlantean teachings. Is it possible that some of those Atlantean teachings were taken then by Moses and adopted and became part of our Torah? You might not like me using words like Atlantis and the like. That's too bad. Like I said, this course of Kabbalah is going to be iconoclastic. And you need to know the continuity of things, the reception. What we received in our Torah from Moses existed long, long before. Because it's something that is revealed in an ancient text, 500-600 years old. It's called Umeshelig Albin. I translated this section and released it to my KosherTorah school audience a long time ago, a few months ago. And I know what it said that was so controversial that I had to include not only my translation, but the original Hebrew pages. Because in those pages, the rabbi who wrote these teachings said in the pre-Adamic civilizations, Abraham was there, as was Isaac and Jacob and Moses and Torah and the Messiah and the resurrection. And those who were then Israel rose to become the Malachim and the angels who are our guardian angels of today. And that which is the lower species then rose up to become man of today and Israel of today. It's a rather radical teaching. A lot of people can't handle that. We can refer to that in the language of the Ariel as the Shvirat HaKilim, the breaking of the vessels. People don't want to hear that. Oh, no, we're new, we're unique, we're special. Sorry. We are new, we are unique, and we are special, but not in the way that you think. We have to expand the boundaries, the parameters of knowledge to see the truth. When we go into our Torah, we already see functioning an interaction with the higher dimensional realities. We can call it prophecy if you like. We know that in Genesis 6, the sons of God came down and took the daughters of men. Some interpret the sons of God as being human beings, meaning the sons of Cain took the daughters of Seth. But other traditions say no. These were entities who came from the stars. They're called the Ishim Angels. They're called the Watchers. Now, some call them angels. You think of an angel as a being of light. They're all wearing long white robes, blonde-haired, right? Blue-eyed, of course. And with big wings, and they're very sexy, male or female. And, of course, those are fantasies. But here is something made very clear. These entities, these sons of God, came down because apparently there was a lack of good girls to date in outer space. So there was a movie that was made many, many years ago called Earth Girls Are Easy. Ha, ha, ha. Well, I guess that's what the sons of God were thinking. They must have been the nerds of the angels who couldn't get themselves a date up in the Pleiades or Orion. So they came down to Earth and tried to impress, hey, baby, you want to take a ride in my flying saucer, my Merkva? Wink, wink. Now, of course, I'm being facetious. But what I'm sharing with you is clear, because you could not have physical copulation between two species which just don't match. We all know the laws of physics with regards to this. And think about it. When was the last time any of us went to the zoo, which is where we would normally encounter a lower species, and go to the orangutan or chimpanzee section and say, hey, look at that hot orangutan. Hey, baby, ooh, ooh, ah, ah. Right? Now, some of you gals might say, yeah, I think I've been on a date with at least one or more apes. You probably have, but obviously that's facetious. But something happened in Genesis chapter 6. Entities not of this earth came down. According to Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik, in an oral tradition that I heard from him, confirmed by his son Reb Moshe, from a 9th century book by, he never mentioned the name, by Rabbi Yehuda, they were the Ishim Angels, like humanoid extraterrestrials. Who were they? They were the ones who ascended from our previous Shemitah and who are the watchers over us. That's why many of these, in quote, angels look just like us. Just like, Lot encountered in Sodom and Gomorrah. Just like Abraham encountered with his 3 visitors. Whether they were in astral form or physical form, let that be a debate between Maimonides and Nachmanides. But you'll always notice that the angels, for the most part, are always referred to as Ishim, or men in the Bible. So, there's a reason for that. This is the source of our Masorah, our reception. We've always been connected. We've always known that there's a higher world or higher worlds, higher dimensions. We, in our present limited thought, think of them as supernatural or spiritual. We're disconnected. We don't see, we don't experience, and therefore we don't know. And therefore you can debate. So, let's have a debate. This is my finger. I'm sure everyone will agree that this is my finger. Now we know that there are multiple invisible angels all over the place. Here is a question that we can debate. How many angels can right now be sitting on the end of my finger and dancing a jig? How many? Well, it's a stupid thing. Well, really, is it? Well, let's argue, let's debate, let's discuss, and we'll go on in theoretical discussion forever. That is what we call philosophy. You are speaking speculatively about that which you cannot prove. Sorry. For me, that's a waste of time. I'm obviously giving you a modern example of an old I believe it was Christian example, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin idea. Okay, it's ridiculous. Do you know what an angel is? If a real one of these Ishim came down and encountered you, or you encountered it, would you recognize it? How would you know? It's not carrying its angel ID card. Today, you have to have your COVID ID card. Well, the angels don't carry ID cards. So, if you stopped an angel at a checkpoint, halt, I'm an angel, I gotta go. Where's your angel ID card? Somebody is saying here in comment, they are not limited in our space. Oh, really? And who told you that? Did they tell you that? How do you know what their limitations are or are not? I know the answer. Well, because I read it in the book. And this rabbi said that, and therefore it's true. Let me tell you something about truth. Rabbis say this, and rabbis say that. And no matter what it is that you want to hear, I'll show you a book that says it. Tell me the opinion you want to talk about in mysticism or rationalism, in Jewish law, in Kabbalah. Tell me your opinion. You want to talk about pre-Adamics? Talk about pre-Adamics. You want to talk about those who deny pre-Adamics? Talk about them. You want to talk about extraterrestrials? Talk about them. Those who deny it? Talk about them. I can show you, for example, laws of Jewish practice. On the Sabbath, what is the law with regards to brushing one's teeth? I can show you those who say it's totally permissible. You could use toothbrush, toothpaste, and the like. To the exact opposite extreme, you can't do anything, don't touch it. And every opinion in between. That's the one thing I love about Judaism as a religion. We are not monolithic. We are fluid. And that fluidity is a foundation for understanding Kabbalah. You see, in the Bible, going back, just remember Noah. Noah was told, take the animals 2 by 2, except for the clean animals where you take a larger number. Where is the identity of the clean animals enumerated in the Bible? Somehow Noah knew, but it doesn't say where he learned it from. Noah was in that pre-flood world. We all know that Noah landed his ark on Mount Ararat, and yes, it really still is up there in that area bordering, I believe, Turkey and Russia, blocked off completely. You try to go up there now, they'll shoot you dead. They don't want any evidence to be exposed. They got their reasons. Not that we agree, but they do. Well, where did Noah build his ark? Where did he take off from? Mesopotamia, land of Israel. Syria? I don't know, maybe Brooklyn. Now, the civilization and the culture that existed in those pre-Adamic days, those pre-flood days, we have a word to describe it today which comes to us from Plato, and we call that the civilization of Atlantis. Whether you like it or not, however you want to interpret it, Noah was an Atlantean, and the ark was built in the Atlantean civilization. No, not necessarily on an island continent that was out in the Atlantic Ocean. There really was nothing that actually fell. Most likely with continental shift and the likes. Very well portrayed in the 2012 film, you should know. Most likely the continent of Atlantis, the civilization of advancement and all that, probably is the Antarctic right now, with all the secrets and weirdo stuff going on down there, but another topic for another time. But we received an awareness of, an integration with those ancient sources. Abraham knew this. He walked with God. We have all kinds of stories and legends of how Abraham came to this knowledge. Fine, whatever, but he did. And he interacted with this greater reality. And he taught that to his sons and to his sons after him. And so we find the likes of good old grandson Jacob, who is very, very powerful with the force. This is the guy with all the dreams, if you remember, right? He's on the way and he sees this dream with the Sulam, the ladder going into heaven. He has to go and live with good old Uncle Laban, who tradition tells us was the true definition of a dark lord. And that somehow Jacob learned ways and means to overcome evil Laban and best him at his own game, and became, if you will, a master of what today we would call occultic forces. No, not on the bad side, the good side. It still didn't save Jacob from many of the troubles that he faced. You see, when we think that occultic power, psychic power, can protect us from the stupidity and foolishness of our own behavior, that is where you misunderstand the power of the psychic realm. So unfortunately, the powers of Darth Vader and the Jedi are going to have to remain in the Star Wars fictional universe. And we're not going to be putting our hands out, choking you from a distance. I find your lack of faith disturbing. You can find it disturbing what the heck you want. All right, that's make-believe. So for example, the powerful master, Jacob. His daughter goes out and acted rather promiscuously. She ended up getting herself in big trouble in the story, which is documented in the Torah. And her brothers, rather than use the force, used the sword and handled it appropriately. The story goes on. Joseph becomes a master of this psychic ability, and he's able to interact with Pharaoh and is able to read psychically Pharaoh's mind and his dreams and tell him what needs to be done. Psychically, intuitively, Pharaoh, the recipient of the ancient ways, recognized the power in this Joseph who came to him, remember, as a slave. And said, this guy ain't no slave. This guy's tough. This guy's a tough guy. And he makes him Tzafnat Paneach, says, you're now prime minister. You can handle it. Rest is the story we know from the Bible. So the psychic ability is always there right from the beginning. You'll notice that's one thing missing from the story of the patriarchs, who were psychically attuned. Nowhere is there a discussion of a theological mysticism. Nowhere are they talking about we are in touch with this or that world and we know of this and that emanation of God or anything of the kind. Did they know chants which could alter consciousness? By all means. Because we see later in the book of Judges and Samuel and the like, we read about the children of the prophets, the Chug Nevi'im, B'nai Nevi'im, the children of the prophets, who would use song and chant and the like to go into a trance. We see this with the later prophets as well. So this must have been a tradition passed down through the ages and ages. Did Moses practice that? Probably not. Because our tradition tells us about Moses that his encounter with the, in quote, higher dimensions was rather significantly different than others. And I'm going to explain to you real simple what the difference is. If we want to experience the higher dimension, we have to go there. We go into that dimension using the vessel and vehicle of that dimension, which we understand as, called today, astral body, astral projection, power of the mind, remote viewing, and the like. That's what prophecy has become and the like. Moses was different. Moses did ascend to heaven. But for Moses, heaven came down to earth and spoke to him here. It was a true, close encounter of the most supernatural kind. We know that the power that Moses interacted with was a tangible, realistic force, which the Torah calls the kavod, the glory of God. And you know what happens if you got a little too close to that glory of God? It wasn't philosophical. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't metaphorical. It was a tangible energy field that if you got a little too close, bam! You were toasted. I'm sure you remember the story of Nadav and Abihu. They didn't sin before God and God punished them. It just broke out the energy. Even the commentator Rashi states that what happened was two streams of light went up their nostrils and burned them from within. It sounded like an electrocution. We all know the story of the power of the Ark of the Covenant. There was an active, viable, real technology going on there. Moses was taught, knew, and understood this. And then it had to be layered, concealed, because remember who we're dealing with, the ancient culture, the ancient times. The rank and file couldn't handle this, and the knowledge of it was reserved for those who could. That became known as the priesthood of the Levites. They received these traditions from Moses. We call this today the oral Torah. They learned how to interact with the higher dimensional planes. It was experiential. It was not philosophical. The ways and means of this are well documented, at least by pointing to it, in our Torah. So we know that we can extract ways and means from the Torah. I've been doing this since I published my book, Let There Be Knowing, back in May of 2021. And for those of you who are supporting students of our KosherTorah school, you know that since then, I have been releasing week by week codes of holy names and the psychic practices for their usage, for the practical expansion of consciousness and experience and interaction with the higher dimensions. That's what it's all about. That is what the real Kabbalah is all about. And like I said, what Kabbalah was no longer is. What we have today that we call Kabbalah isn't the real Kabbalah. In the Bible, if you remember, if you thought that you were going to see God, it was considered death. Jacob, it says he encountered a man. And all our traditions say there was an angel. It was a higher dimensional being. And how does Jacob interact with this higher dimensional being? He bows down. He says, yes, thank you for appearing to me. Oh, show me your wisdom. Not our Jacob. He's a son of a gun. It's like a modern Israeli. He says, oh, you're an angel, yeah? Come here, angel. Let me show you something. And it says that they wrestled. They fought. The definition of Yisrael isn't just a bloodline descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's a spiritual code word for those who are able to interact with this higher dimensional plane as an equal. Like Jacob, who became Israel and therefore became powerful in the abilities and the ways and the manipulations of things. But remember, you never become so heavenly minded that you become no earthly good. So when his attachment to his physical son, Joseph, which was so intensely emotional, was challenged, yanked, thought his son was dead. His emotional cord was cut, his heart broken, and that severed his psychic abilities. So we always say that you can't experience prophecy, psychic abilities, when you're depressed. You need to get that energy properly balanced and aligned. Philosophy doesn't teach you this. If you read throughout the Torah, You'll find that there are mentions of entities that live out in the desert, which today we would call earth spirits and the like. You could read, of course, the famous story with King Saul, who sought out the witch of Endor, and who apparently rose some aspect of the spirit of Samuel the prophet. Okay, it's all there. We see in later traditions how the individual prophets are seeing God and cherubim and all these other kind of weird other types of entities. We have all their different names. Ezekiel goes so far as to try to describe them. And of course, my dear friend, member from Ancient Aliens, Eric von Daniken, of course, likes to think that this is a flying saucer. Again, the little guys with the ray guns. I always have to say, Eric, you don't know the Hebrew. It doesn't say that at all. So no, it's not like that at all. Somebody here is quoting about dark energy and dark matter, invisible matter. All of that, I'm sure, is very, very true. Modern science knows that there are particles which are hyper light in nature. Tachyons. Who the heck knows what else they've discovered? I will tell you that just as you have atomic energy, really is what we are, which modulates at a frequency what we call below the speed of light and therefore forms into matter. It goes at a higher frequency, it forms energy. Remember Einstein, E equals mc squared and all that stuff? Yeah, well, that's science. So maybe that passageway between the natural and what we call the supernatural is at that speed of light? Maybe. But we must recognize that the ancients always had contact. That contact was experiential. No one had to write a book about it. No one had to try to describe it to you. No one tried to tell you what it was like. You experienced it for yourself. And you never ever wrote about it at all. And you know what we call this? I'm sure you all know. Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah. And there you have it. And where was this oral Torah reposited? It was given to Moses. Yes, Moses, of course, received the Torah from Sinai. But the curious revelation is not for the first time. That will shock a lot of people. And Moses passed it on, like we say in Pirkei Avot, to Yehoshua, to the prophets, to the men of the great assembly, and none of them bothered to write it down. The oral Torah remained. It was a process and a technique of experiential revelation. And that is what Ezekiel was doing on the river Kabar, and which was so profound. Because some were of the opinion that this type of energetic frequency could only resonate within a specific physical location. And it was proven that that was not the case at all. So you see, the Bible brings us a level of experience. We see later that even with Daniel is interacting again with these angels. And for the first time under Babylonian influence, are some of them named, specifically Michael and Gabriel. And gives us a little bit of weirdness going on. You might remember the biblical story in which Daniel offers a prayer to heaven. And if you remember, the Persian Empire had taken control of Babylon at the time. And he's sitting there waiting for the angel to come from heaven with his answer. And he's waiting and he's waiting. And apparently the angelic message got, quote, lost in the mail. Weeks later, the angel shows up. Daniel says, "Where the heck have you been?" And he goes, "Oh, I got held up." You're an angel of God, you got held up? The heck does that mean? "Oh yeah, the angel of Persia didn't let me come in." What? You're being sent from God. And there's an angel down here in charge of a country who puts up his hand and says, "Hold it, You don't have permission to come into my turf. Oh, really? You don't find this kind of interaction in the days of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Moses and Aaron, or David and Solomon, or Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah. But here's Daniel, and he's experiencing this. But another curious thing about Daniel, while he's experiencing all this stuff, he's given all the profound prophecies, the end of days, and all this stuff. One of the things that is very clear is that nowhere does God speak directly to Daniel. Nowhere does it say, and the Lord spoke to Daniel, saying, thus saith the Lord, speak to the children of Israel, etc. And that is why Daniel is called a seer, but he is not called a prophet. And why the book of Daniel is not in the prophet section of the Bible. The experiential teachings never ceased, were never lost. They continued down through the years, and even though our sages teach that with the coming of Haggai and Zechariah, and of course Malachi, that ended prophecy. That's true, that's true. Prophecy, but you have to understand what prophecy is. Prophecy is not communion with God. It means God giving a political message to someone for the children of Israel, for the sake of the nation. That came to an end. God spoke enough to the nation. Now he only speaks directly to individuals. But as a point that I made in a recent writing, prophecy ceased to exist, but didn't cease to exist. That can be rather confusing. So we say instead that instead of what continued, we don't call it prophecy, we call it Ruach HaKodesh. We call it divine inspiration. But that in itself has many, many ways and means and definitions to it. So one of the words we call it is Ma'aseh Merkava. And that is the way these teachings came down to us into the days of the Talmud, in which in the Talmud it says there were three schools. One called the Sitrei Arayot, the secrets of forbidden mixtures. This was a knowledge and awareness of the laws of nature and where things were and were not to be placed. This is not something you would learn in a book, but rather something that you learn to experience through instinct. Instinct. You know what that is? Let me give you an example of instinct. Just tonight, you met our new canine daughter, Levana. If I were to take her and Sierra both and put two bowls of food down on the floor, one with poison and one with good food, all I could tell you right now, both of them would sniff. And they would recognize the poison and go, they wouldn't go near it and they eat their good food. Instinct. They know it. Now, I'm going to put two plates of food before you and I. One with delicious, nice, scrumptious, lovely, fattening with all kinds of poisons and toxins and all kinds of unhealthy food. Now I'm going to put a plate of raw, healthy vegetables. Which one are we going to eat? Cake. Ice cream. Judging from the obesity of all too many people, we already know we choose the poison. We don't eat the healthy. My dogs know better than that, but we don't. What does that say about us? Instinct. Sitrei Arayot. That's what it is. Can't learn it from a book. You got to learn it experientially. The second school is called Ma'aseh Bereshit, the secrets of creation. Yes, we really do live in a matrix. And yes, everything in this world is built upon tonal frequencies. And if you learn the manipulation of tonal frequencies, you can change everything here. That's the secrets of the Sefer Yetzirah and how to work them. And for those of you who follow me here, you know, I have taught those secrets for many, many years. Now the Ma'aseh Merkava. The interaction with the higher dimensional planes. Knowing, realizing, and experiencing what it's like to live pan-dimensionally. You think, well, that's an interesting concept and a theory. I'm not talking about concepts and theories. I'm talking about reality. Let me tell you about three examples of this reality which I've experienced myself when I was a younger man. The first was with Rabbi Mordechai Sharabi, the head of the Mikubalim in Yerushalayim. This is a man in his 70s who was physically ill, but his psychic abilities were sharp and clear. You'd walk into his presence and he could gaze into you. He'd tell you your name. He'd tell you things about you because he could see your energy signature or your soul, or your astral, and read it as if he was reading words from a book. Baba Sali, Rabbi Yisrael Abu Chatzera, had that same ability, as did Rabbi Yitzhak Kaduri. There was a story with Rav Kaduri that I am personally aware of. I wasn't there, but my student told me this, that he had to go to see Rav Kaduri about an issue with regards to his own son. And he went to the rabbi's house, because in those days, before the rabbi was this big, holier-than-thou man, he's a normal, regular, everyday guy. And you wanted to talk to the rabbi, you'd knock on his door, and there he was. I knew Rav Kaduri. I've been by him many a time. All right? And my student, his name was Mas'ud, he went to the rabbi's. The rabbi was actually leaving his home. He was going out. And he saw Mas'ud walking down the street, and he turned to him, and he goes, Mas'ud, I'm sorry, I don't have time to talk to you right now, but the issue with your son is going to be taken care of. In 3 days, you'll see everything's going to be all right. And Mas'ud stood there, frozen. How did the rabbi know my name? How did the rabbi know what I wanted? How did the rabbi even address these things? The answer, those of you who have ever seen Rav Kaduri, he lived pan-dimensionally. He was like this all over the place. I remember him. He was like here and there, both at the same time. Now, somebody who doesn't believe in quote, there, would say, oh, he's out of his mind. He probably was. But I don't say that in a negative. I say that in a positive. He was out of his present mind because he was in higher dimensions simultaneously. And every now and then those higher dimensions, they poke us in the head. And sometimes if we pay attention, we become sensitive. Something is there, we sense. Something is there, you feel. You have a dream. Some dreams you dismiss, but some you know are deeper than this. This is that inner knowing. And the real Kabbalah is the reception. The Rabbanit, of course, heard my reference to the healthy foods. Luckily, she's not embarrassing me. But yes, the Robinson, you should know, is a vegan. She only eats all these healthy foods. And, you know, with me putting on pounds with the COVID and the stuff, yeah, it's the opposite. That, whatever. When you are sensitive and you are aware, then you can open up and receive. And if you have a dream, you need to be more like Joseph to understand the dreams. Don't go trying to buy books on dream interpretation. You will not learn a thing. You need to experience this internally. You need to learn the reception. You need to learn how to receive from the higher reality into the lower, merging them into the one reality. That, and that alone, is one who has received and is therefore the definition and the only definition of a Mekubal, or in other words, a Kabbalist. So for those of you who learn all your books, that's great, wonderful. You are an academic scholar. You know all kinds of metaphysical philosophies and ideas and concepts, the likes of which you probably have no idea have their source in Aristotle and Plato and Pliny and Plotinus and the like. And you can say, no, they're revealed from heaven. Of course they are, because if that's what you believe, then good for you. But just in case you want to know the real Kabbalah, you want to know what the other rabbis aren't going to teach you, well, then we're going to learn, because that is what this course is all about. So we're going to take a walk through history. We're going to take a walk through ideas. We're going to take a walk through experiences. And I'm going to show you what they don't want you to see. So, just in case you want to take that red pill like in the Matrix and wake up and see the real world, this is going to be a course for you. But for those of you who don't like to rock the boat, well, I'll give you a quote from Dune, which Frank Herbert put in the words of one of his characters: show me a smooth operation, and I'll show you a cover-up, because real boats rock. So those who like to smooth things out and make it homogeneous and tell you, this is the way it is, follow authors, yeah, follow the Rabbi, follow this, follow that. You know what I'm making a statement of. That's never the Torah way. You have to open your mind, open your heart. And the first step very well might be to close the books in order to do this. You want to receive and be a mikubal and know the real Kabbalah? That's step one. And I ran out of time. So, got to get back to other things. Got to take the Rabbanit shopping to make sure she has her vegetables. Got to take care of little Sierra and little Lavana and make sure they have all their stuff. You say, oh, Rabbi, that's not important. Oh, yes, it is. It's vitally important because it is part of the greater whole. We each have our part to play in that greater whole. Don't look to become so heavenly minded that you become no earthly good. Ground yourself and bring heaven down to earth. Mikubal. I'm Ariel Tzadok, KosherTorah School. I'll see you next time. God bless. Shalom. You want to say goodnight, Sierra? Come. You want to come up? Are you going to come up? Yes or no? You never come up, you lazy thing, you. She's here. I'm going to try to tilt the camera down. Say goodnight, Sierra. There's Sierra for you. All right. So now you saw both my daughters tonight. God bless. See you all soon. Shalom.